Hello and welcome to this masterclass interview brought to you by The Banker from Malta. My name is Michael Imson and I'm contributing editor of The Banker magazine. And I'm joined here today by Professor Bannister, Chairman of the Malta Financial Services Authority, the MFSA, the country's single regulator. We're going to talk today about several things. First of all, Malta's role as an international financial centre. Secondly, about the regulatory system here. Thirdly, how Malta has managed to weather the financial crisis and economic recession. And then lastly, we're going to look at some of the regulatory and market developments in Europe and how they impact on Malta. So, Professor Bannister, let's start with Malta's role as an international financial centre. What are its defining characteristics? What really makes Malta excel as a financial centre?
Thank you very much. Good morning. There is a hallmark here in that we're applying what you might call Anglo-Saxon style of business, but with Mediterranean characteristics. And this is something that we had noticed in the past in starting the development of the center. There seemed to be a lack of service in other jurisdictions, a lack of service being provided to license holders. And this lack of service essentially meant to us that there was no regular contact between the regulators and the licensed company. So as a matter of policy, we decided that all regulators must meet all companies, be they at the pre-application stage, at the application stage, and at the post-application stage. And this has become a hallmark in the country. I think we would say that it is the openness and the transparency of the regulator. In fact, the regulator carries out internal audits by external experts, so we see how we are adhering to core principles, particularly in banking, and this will be the third time that we're doing it this year, and there are external consultants from other regulatory authorities, from the IMF, and from this year we're saying that we want increased transparency. As we demand more transparency from companies, the regulator should become more transparent.
Can you give us a clear idea of the extent of the financial sector here in terms of numbers of banks, numbers of insurance companies, fund managers, and that sort of thing?
There is no intention to establish what you might call a bloated center, that it will overheat. The government wants it to be a pillar in the economy. If we look at what we see today, it's contributing about 6 to 7% of GDP. This is direct intermediation, without taking into account what's offered as a contribution from accountancy firms, from law firms, from treasury companies, which are not licensable. So there we reckon there must be another equivalent amount. In terms of people, our assessment is that there must be somewhere around 7,000 to 7,500. We know it's continuously growing, but we keep an eye on the competencies, because as regulators we're also charged with training of the licensed personnel, and from time to time we're in touch with companies and look at the skills. There are about, I believe, 25 banks. 4 doing domestic business, the others doing a lot of international business. There is a good developing insurance sector with about 50 to 55 companies, some very good companies, insurance companies coming from big multinationals establishing their European operations here in Malta. This year we're seeing either because of reactions to the hedge fund business in terms of the financial crisis, etc. We're seeing quite a significant number of asset managers coming into Malta, and we're seeing quite a number of funds being established here. I think the idea of having a fund being domiciled in Malta, where the regulator actually goes to the offices of the fund and looks at whether the funds have been having regular board meetings, whether it's adhering to the investment policies that it has published in the prospectus, that we do extensive due diligence on the managers. Anybody who comes here will have to go through an extensive due diligence, whether it's banking, whether it's funds, whether it's insurance.
You mentioned insurance a couple of times there. What to what extent is the insurance sector here dominated by captive insurers?
That's right. It depends on your definition of a captive. Different jurisdictions use different definitions. We have a straightforward definition that if the insurance company is providing insurance services to a group, then that's fine. The moment it extends beyond the group, or let's say in terms of clients of the group, then it becomes third party. So here we've seen insurance companies, big multinationals coming here, and they suddenly realized that they could have an insurance company providing other services. So basically there are more general insurers than actually captive companies, because the captives are specific. In some jurisdictions that's called an extended captive. So, but basically all the companies would come into the definition of an extended captive.
Yeah. So you've mentioned numbers of funds and banks, 25 banks for instance. How does that compare, the size of the sector, the numbers of financial firms here? How does that compare with, say, 10 years ago, to give us some idea of growth?
10 years ago, the country essentially was starting to prepare for Europe. In those days, yes, there were a few banks, mainly Austrian banks. I think there were about 5 Austrian banks, essentially doing trade finance and investments, and the four local banks. Since then, it has grown. I think the major important factor actually was Malta became more known, or the perception of Malta became more known as a finance center once we joined Europe. It seemed very clear, even in the reports that we receive out from the IMF, G20, Financial Stability Board, that also Malta now is a major contributor in terms of the development of a finance center.
Can you tell us some of the names of the organisations here, some names that people would recognise as internationally famous firms?
You can name HSBC, you can name the Portuguese bank, Banif. Deutsche Bank actually has a financial institution here, which is now moving forward. In terms of insurance, you see Munich Re. So there are significant names on the island.
You mentioned